My name is Emma Carter, and I am 31 years old. For 5 years, I have been sending my parents $3,500 every month, quietly and without recognition. Month after month, transfer after transfer, I gave because I thought maybe it would make me matter. But in their eyes, I was still the child who never measured up, the daughter who chose the wrong path. All that time, they told everyone that my older brother, Daniel, the surgeon, was the generous one, the provider, the son any parent would dream of having. At every family gathering, his name lit up the room. Every toast was to his accomplishments. Every whispered brag was about his career. I sat there, smiling politely, while my contributions dissolved into nothing. They never knew that I was not just another office worker hidden in some cubicle. I was not just filing tax returns or balancing ledgers for other people's success. What I held in my hands was power, real power, the kind that decides the future of entire organizations. And yet, in my own family, I was invisible. What they could not see was that everything was about to change. The truth, the whole truth, would not stay buried any longer. It was going to come out at the worst possible time for them, at the height of Daniel's shining moment, in front of hundreds of people who thought they knew exactly who we were. I know some of you listening to me right now have felt that same sting, that same cold shadow of being overlooked while you gave and gave. Maybe your siblings outshone you. Maybe your parents praised someone else while dismissing your quiet sacrifices. If that resonates with you, let me know in the comments, because you are not alone, and what I am about to tell you might sound like your story too. One evening at the Waldorf Hotel in downtown Chicago, beneath the glow of chandeliers and the hum of champagne glasses, I was going to stop being invisible. The Waldorf ballroom shimmered that night like a dream that did not belong to me. Crystal chandeliers threw golden light across round tables draped in white linen, each topped with tall vases of orchids. The air carried the scent of roses and expensive perfume, mixed with the faint clink of silverware. Hundreds of guests filled the hall, surgeons in tailored suits, hospital board members with their diamond-wearing partners, residents in borrowed gowns trying to look like they belonged. It was the celebration of Daniel Carter, the youngest department chief St. Mary's Hospital had ever appointed. At the front of the room, a massive banner declared his achievement in bold letters, celebrating excellence in leadership. The spotlight was his, as it had always been. My parents floated through the crowd, glowing with borrowed prestige. Mother, wrapped in a new navy suit Daniel had purchased, accepted compliments as though they were hers by right. Father, tall and proud in his blazer, guided her from table to table, beaming whenever someone praised their son. Their eyes never found me. I sat at a table near the back, pushed close to the service entrance where waiters disappeared with trays. Table number 21, surrounded by distant relatives whose names I barely remembered and partners of cousins I had not spoken to in years. My black dress, bought on sale from a modest store, looked apologetic beside the shimmering gowns around me. I adjusted the hem nervously, as though fabric could shield me from being forgotten. "Emma dear, could you move your chair?" Aunt Carol squeezed behind me, angling her phone toward the stage. "I want a better shot of Daniel when he begins his speech." I slid aside without a word. My parents were across the room, laughing at some joke delivered by a board member. They looked radiant, as though the years had rewarded them with everything they deserved. The woman next to me, someone's date, leaned in with polite curiosity. "Your brother is extraordinary. Your parents must be over the moon. Are you in medicine too?" Her tone already assumed the answer. I smiled thinly. "No, I work in finance." Her expression shifted to that familiar blend of pity and dismissal. "Well, that's practical at least." She turned back toward the stage, her interest gone. Practical, invisible, forgettable, that was my assigned role. I let my eyes wander over the crowd, recognizing faces not from family dinners but from boardrooms, investors, and distant business dealings. They did not know me here, not yet, and I intended to keep it that way until the right moment. My phone buzzed in my purse with a message from my assistant reminding me of tomorrow's board meeting, but I silenced it. Tonight was not about spreadsheets or corporate decisions. Tonight was about the truth finally stepping out from the shadows. Daniel stood at the podium, tall in a tailored suit that looked as though it had been made to magnify his confidence. He tapped the microphone and the room fell instantly silent. He was the golden son, the healer, the prodigy. I was the other one. I leaned back in my chair, letting his voice wash over me. The crowd nodded with admiration at every phrase, already prepared to worship him. And yet in that moment, even as I listened from the back of the room, I knew something the rest of them did not. I knew that their golden child stood on a foundation built with my money, my sacrifices, my silence. And tonight, that silence would end. Every flicker of light from the chandeliers reminded me how far apart we seemed. He glowed at the center. I was tucked away at the edges, but sometimes, those who sit in the shadows hold the brightest matches. I watched my mother dab at her eyes with a silk handkerchief while my father squeezed her shoulder. They looked complete, triumphant, certain that their son had elevated the family into a new stratosphere. And me? I was the quiet number cruncher who had somehow found a way to be both essential and expendable in their world. The applause roared as Daniel began his formal speech. I folded my hands in my lap and smiled faintly. The night was only beginning, and though they did not see it yet, the story was about to shift. When Daniel's voice rose across the ballroom, I felt myself drift backward in time. His words about sacrifice and family pride blurred into echoes of another moment, one that had sealed my fate in our family. I was 19 when I told my parents I wanted to study finance instead of medicine. My grades had been strong enough for medical school, but I had no desire to wear a white coat. Numbers spoke to me in a way anatomy never could. I saw patterns, opportunities, stories hidden inside columns of figures. Mother had repeated the word finance as though it were poison on her tongue. Father looked at me as if I had confessed a crime. Enjoyment doesn't pay the bills, he said. Look at Daniel. He is building a real career, something meaningful, saving lives. What does finance offer? Sitting in a cubicle counting other people's success? That was the moment my role in the family crystallized. Daniel was the savior. I was the disappointment. I graduated with honors, landed a position at a Fortune 500 firm, and later climbed to an executive role, but none of it mattered at family dinners. Each holiday, each birthday, each reunion became a stage for Daniel's endless achievements. My promotions were politely acknowledged before the conversation returned to his latest research or surgery. 5 years ago, when my parents whispered about struggling with the mortgage after father retired, I started sending money. $3,500 every month, wired directly to their joint account. I told myself I did not need credit for it, that maybe the quiet act of love would one day be recognized for what it was. That never happened. At dinner tables, I watched Mother lift her glass and thanked Daniel for paying their bills. Cousins clapped him on the back, praising his generosity. Father toasted him for being the one child who understood family responsibility. I smiled and raised my glass too, swallowing bitterness with each sip of wine. Over 5 years, I sent more than $200,000. That money erased their mortgage, covered Father's medical procedures, renovated the kitchen, even funded a vacation cruise. And still, Daniel's name carried every ounce of credit. I remember Easter 2 years ago, when my cousin Leah leaned across the table with a laugh. It must be hard being Daniel's sister. He is just so accomplished. But hey, we all have our roles, right? He saves lives and well, you do taxes. They all laughed. I laughed too, though something in me cracked that night. From then on, I stopped hoping for recognition. Instead, I began planning for the moment when truth would no longer hide behind Daniel's shadow. As Daniel's speech rolled on, I looked around the ballroom and counted how many faces had unknowingly benefited from my invisibility. Uncles who stayed in the family home I helped save, cousins who enjoyed holidays funded by my practical salary, even neighbors who marveled at the kitchen remodel I had quietly paid for. Every smile, every toast, every word of gratitude had gone to him. The slideshow began behind Daniel, images flashing across a massive screen. Daniel in his white coat, Daniel cutting a ribbon at the hospital, Daniel shaking hands with politicians, Daniel receiving awards. Not one picture included me, not even family portraits, because I was the one behind the camera. 40, 50 photographs, each celebrating him. My absence was complete. Mother took the microphone next, her voice trembling with rehearsed pride. We always knew Daniel was special. He has given us everything, the security, the pride, the assurance that we raised a child who truly makes a difference. Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "Of course, Emma is here too, somewhere in the back. She works in finance." A ripple of laughter slid across the room. Someone patted my hand as if to console me. "Don't worry, dear. We can't all be stars." That was the exact moment my phone lit up with the automatic notification from my bank. Tomorrow's scheduled transfer of $3,500. With a single swipe, I canceled it. I sat straighter in my chair. For the first time in years, the bitterness inside me was replaced by clarity. My money had built the foundation they celebrated tonight. My sacrifices had been erased by their blindness. But the time for silence was over. The microphone gleamed in Daniel's hand as he raised his glass for a final toast. "To family," he said, smiling as the crowd echoed him. "To the ones who made me who I am today." The applause thundered through the ballroom, but my pulse was louder. My legs shook as I pushed my chair back. The scrape of wood against marble drew a few glances, but I kept walking. Each step across the polished floor echoed like a drumbeat, carrying me closer to the stage. For 31 years I had sat in the shadows. Tonight, I would not. Daniel turned toward me, confused at first, then irritated as though my presence were an interruption to his show. "Emma," he said into the microphone with a forced chuckle. "Always shy, my sister. Want to say something?" "Yes," I said. My voice rang sharper than I expected. "I do." I took the microphone from his hand. The ballroom stilled. Hundreds of faces turned toward me, expectant, puzzled. My parents froze, eyes wide, half afraid I might embarrass them. For a moment, silence stretched so long I could hear the hum of the chandelier lights. "My name is Emma Carter," I began, steadying my breath. "I am 31 years old, and for the last 5 years, I have been sending my parents $3,500 every month." Gasps rippled through the room. Daniel stiffened beside me. Mother pressed a hand to her chest. Father leaned forward in his chair, frowning. "That is over $200,000, I continued, my voice rising. $200,000 that I earned, that I sent, that kept their home, paid their bills, covered their vacations, and every single time, you all were told it was Daniel's generosity." A stunned silence settled across the hall. I pulled my phone from my purse and held up the screen, glowing with rows of transactions, each labeled to their account. "Here is the proof. Every month. My name, my money." Whispers spread through the crowd. Someone at the back muttered, "She's right. Look at that." Daniel's face reddened. "Emma, what are you doing? This isn't the place." "Not the place?" My laugh was brittle. "This ballroom is filled with everyone who has spent years praising you for sacrifices that were never yours." I turned to the audience. "He let you believe it was him. He accepted every compliment, every toast, while I sat silent." Mother's voice trembled as she stood. "Emma, please, we can talk about this later." "No, Mother. We talk about it now. Because while you were thanking Daniel, he was taking my money and hiding it. He was gambling with it. He was investing it in schemes that failed. He even used it to cover debts you never knew he had." The room erupted with shocked murmurs. Faces that had glowed with admiration for Daniel now stared with disbelief, some with pity. A hospital board member rose from his table. "Dr. Carter, is this true?" Daniel's mouth opened and closed, searching for words. "She's twisting things." "Am I?" I cut him off. My voice was iron. "I have emails, call logs, bank statements. Do you want me to show them?" I tapped my phone. "I can send them to every person in this room in less than a minute." The board member exchanged looks with colleagues, their expressions darkening. Daniel tried again, voice cracking. "It was temporary. I meant to pay her back. It was..." "Lies," I said, holding the microphone like a gavel. "You didn't just steal money. You stole my existence. You took every ounce of love I poured into this family and wrapped it around yourself. And you let them believe I was nothing." The ballroom was dead silent, except for Daniel's ragged breathing. I turned to my parents. "For 5 years I gave without asking for thanks. I thought maybe if I kept giving you would see me. You never did. But you will now." The hospital board member's chair screeched as he stood. "Dr. Carter, we'll need to speak with you immediately after this event." Daniel's face drained of color. He tried to speak, but the microphone was back in my hand. I looked across the ballroom, at the stunned faces, at my family who had never truly known me. For the first time, their silence felt like recognition. "If you were in my place," I asked the room, my voice steady, "would you have stayed silent, or would you have spoken?" The board members whispered among themselves, their eyes darting between Daniel and me. The hospital's chief administrator, a sharp woman in a burgundy dress, stood up and adjusted her glasses. "Dr. Carter," she said coldly, "this is a serious accusation. If what your sister says is true, It could mean you misrepresented your financial standing to this institution. That would make your recent appointment highly questionable, Daniel stammered. It's a misunderstanding, It is not a misunderstanding, I said firmly, cutting him off. My voice no longer shook. Every transfer is documented. Every call he made to me begging for money is recorded. Every promise to return what he owed is in writing. I have kept everything. Gasps rippled across the tables. I could see relatives lowering their eyes, unwilling to meet mine. People who once joked about me being the quiet one now avoided my gaze altogether. Daniel's jaw clenched as he leaned toward me, whispering into the side of the microphone, forgetting it was still live. You're going to ruin me. I turned my head so everyone could hear my response. You ruined yourself. I just stopped protecting you. The administrator exchanged a glance with two board members and spoke again, her tone like ice. We will review these documents immediately. Until then, Dr. Carter, you are relieved of any pending duties. The audience erupted into shocked murmurs. My mother's hand flew to her mouth as if she could physically push the truth back inside. Father sat rigid, staring at Daniel as though seeing him for the first time. Daniel tried to snatch the microphone back, but I held it tight. Do you know what's funny? I said, scanning the crowd. You all thought I was invisible. You thought I was just the girl in finance, the one without the white coat. But invisibility has its benefits. No one sees you coming until it's too late. The silence that followed was different this time. It was not dismissal or pity, it was recognition. I lifted my phone again. Board of Sterling Global, I said loudly enough for the room to hear. Are you on the line? A clear voice echoed from the speaker. Yes, Emma. We are. The crowd turned, confused. Daniel's eyes widened. He knew that name. Sterling Global was one of the largest multinational corporations in the world. This, I explained to the audience, is my board of directors. I am Chief Financial Officer of Sterling Global, a company worth over $12 billion. Daniel has been using my money to pretend he was your provider, but I am the one who had the power all along. The collective gasp that followed seemed to shake the chandeliers themselves. Guests who had barely noticed me all evening now leaned forward in their chairs, hanging on my every word. Daniel sputtered. You're a CFO? Yes, I said. And tonight, I was supposed to authorize a grant of $600,000 for the hospital. Money you claim to have raised yourself. Money you paraded as proof of your brilliance. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. But that money will not be going to you, Daniel. Not anymore. The administrator stepped closer, her face a mixture of relief and shock. Then where will it go? I smiled, though it carried no joy. To students who, like me, were told they were disappointments for choosing finance. To young people who need scholarships to pursue what they love, not what their families demand. Every dollar will go to them. The ballroom erupted. Some applauded. Others gasped. My mother collapsed back into her chair, her face pale. My father rubbed his temples, unable to comprehend. Daniel shouted, his voice cracking. You can't do this. You can't take everything from me. I am not taking anything from you, I replied, lowering the microphone so only he and the front tables could hear. I am taking back what was mine, and what I choose to do with it is no longer your concern. Security entered quietly from the side doors, guided by the administrator. Daniel's protests grew louder, but no one defended him now. The golden sun had been stripped bare. As they escorted him away, I finally exhaled. The room buzzed with whispers, but beneath the noise I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace. Not triumph, not revenge, but the calm that comes when you finally step out of the shadows. I turned back to the audience one last time. For those who spent years believing I was nothing, remember this moment. I was never invisible. You just never chose to see me. I handed the microphone to the stunned host and walked off the stage, my heels clicking against the marble like a final verdict. The ballroom felt different as I stepped down from the stage. The air was no longer sweet with champagne and flattery, but heavy with unease. People shifted in their chairs, some avoiding my gaze, others watching me with new eyes, as though I had become someone entirely different in the span of 10 minutes. My mother sat frozen, her hand still pressed to her chest, whispering something to herself. My father remained rigid, his jaw tight, his eyes darting between me and the doors where Daniel had been led away. I walked back to my table near the service entrance, the place they had tucked me away. This time, though, no one asked me to move so they could take a photo. No one dared to laugh or make small talk about Daniel's brilliance, The silence around me was loud enough to drown out the music. When I picked up my glass of water, my hands were steady. For years, I had trembled at every family dinner, every toast where my brother's name was lifted higher and mine was buried lower. But now, for the first time, I did not tremble at all. The administrator of the hospital approached me quietly, leaning down to speak. "Miss Carter, I cannot tell you what a relief this island. We were moments away from endorsing a program that would have collapsed under false funding. You may have saved us from disaster." Her words were calm, professional, but her eyes betrayed gratitude. I nodded politely. The truth always comes out eventually, better tonight than later. She extended her hand, and when I shook it, the weight of years of invisibility seemed to fall away. For the first time, someone in that room saw me not as Daniel's sister but as Emma Carter, a woman in her own right. At the front of the ballroom, my father finally rose. His voice, usually firm, cracked when he spoke. "Emma," he began, "is it true? You are an executive?" I looked at him across the crowded hall. "Yes, Chief Financial Officer of Sterling Global. For years." He swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. "Why didn't you tell us?" The question stung, though not in the way he intended. I set my glass down carefully. "Because you never wanted to listen. Every time I tried to share my life, you turned the conversation back to Daniel. I stopped trying." My mother blinked rapidly, her eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. "We didn't know," she whispered, almost to herself. We thought finance was nothing." "It was never nothing," I said gently but firmly. "You just chose to see it that way." The room had grown still again, the crowd hanging on every word. They were no longer watching Daniel, the golden son. They were watching me. A cousin rose hesitantly, holding his glass. "To Emma," he said, his voice unsure at first, "for finally showing us who she really island." A few others followed, lifting their glasses. The applause was scattered but genuine, though I did not crave it anymore. Their recognition came too late to heal the wounds, but it confirmed one thing. I had changed the story. I turned to my parents one last time before leaving the hall. "I have given more to this family than you will ever know. But I will not keep giving at the cost of my own worth. If you want me in your lives, it has to be with respect. Love without respect is nothing more than obligation." Without waiting for their response, I picked up my purse and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted as I passed, the sound of my heels marking each step like punctuation. Outside the ballroom doors, the cool night air hit me, and I inhaled deeply. The city lights of Chicago glittered against the sky, and for the first time, I felt like I was standing in my own spotlight. Daniel's downfall was not my victory. My victory was this. I had finally spoken, and they had heard me. The night air outside the Waldorf wrapped around me like a release. The muffled noise of the ballroom faded as the heavy doors closed behind me, replaced by the quiet hum of the city. Taxis slid by on the wet pavement, their headlights cutting through the mist. I stood on the marble steps, clutching my purse to my side, and for a moment I simply breathed. For 5 years I had carried the weight of silence, and in one night it had lifted. A familiar voice called softly from behind me. It was my father. He had followed me out, his blazer hanging open, his face older than I remembered. He stepped down onto the landing, hesitant, as though I were a stranger. "Emma," he said quietly. "Wait." I turned but did not step closer. The glow from the streetlight caught the deep lines around his mouth, lines carved by years of pride and stubbornness. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "I thought I knew my children. I thought I understood who you were. But tonight," he trailed off, searching for words. "You never wanted to understand," I said, not unkindly. "I was there the whole time. You just didn't see me." His shoulders sagged, and for once his authority slipped. "I don't expect forgiveness. Not yet. But I want to try, if you'll let me." I studied him, the man who had raised me yet never truly known me. For years I had longed to hear those words, and now that they came, I felt both vindicated and weary. "Trying is a start," I said. "But trying means change. Real change." He nodded, his throat tight. "I'll do what it takes." Behind him, the ballroom doors opened again, and my mother stepped out. Her eyes were red, her makeup smudged. She looked smaller than she had inside, as though the truth had stripped away the layers of pride she always wore. "I should have defended you," she whispered. "I should have seen what you were giving. I was blind, Emma. Blind and selfish." The words I had craved for years finally came. Yet they could not undo the damage already done. Still, they mattered. They cracked something open. "Then start by seeing me now," I said softly. She nodded, tears slipping freely down her cheeks. My father wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and for the first time in my life, I watched them look at me, not with dismissal, but with recognition. A taxi pulled up to the curb, its light glowing. I raised my hand to signal it. "I need space," I told them. "Time to decide what comes next." Neither of them argued. My father only said, "We'll be here, if you'll have us." I slid into the back seat of the taxi, giving the driver my address. As the car pulled away, I looked back once. My parents stood together on the steps, smaller now against the vast hotel, watching me go. The city unfolded outside the window. Lights flickered on the river, skyscrapers reached into the clouds, and people hurried along sidewalks with lives entirely separate from mine. For once I felt part of something bigger, no longer a shadow trailing behind someone else's glow. When I reached my apartment, I set my phone on the counter and stared at the rows of notifications, messages from colleagues, board members, relatives. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened a blank document on my laptop. At the top, I typed, "The Carter Foundation." It was an idea I had carried quietly for years, born out of every time someone told me finance was worthless. A scholarship fund for students who dreamed of business, accounting, economics, but who lacked support. A foundation to tell them they were seen, they were worthy, they were not invisible. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Tonight had ended one story, but another was just beginning. 6 months passed before I stepped into another ballroom. This time it was not for Daniel, and it was not for my parents. It was for me. The Carter Foundation had taken shape faster than I ever imagined. Once the truth at the Waldorf spread, applications flooded in from students across the country, letters filled with the same words I had once whispered to myself. Overlooked, underestimated, invisible. I read every single one, seeing pieces of myself in their handwriting, their stories, their dreams. The gala was held in a downtown Chicago hotel, smaller than the Waldorf but radiant with warmth. Instead of orchids taller than people, the tables were decorated with handwritten notes from scholarship recipients, thanking donors for believing in them. Instead of polished speeches from surgeons, there were shaky voices of first-generation students, standing nervously at the microphone, describing how a single scholarship had given them hope. I sat at the head table, not hidden near the service doors this time, but at the center. The lights didn't burn on my brother or my parents, they shone on me, and on the young faces who carried the future. My parents were there too. They had asked to come, and though I hesitated at first, I agreed. Months of therapy had softened them, chipped away at the rigid pride that once defined them. My mother clasped my hand before the event began, her grip trembling. "We're proud of you," she whispered. For the first time, I believed she meant it. My father, never a man of many words, simply stood by my side, his presence quieter but steady, as though learning how to be part of my world instead of dragging me into his. Daniel was not in the room. He was in rehab, trying to piece together a life from the wreckage of his lies. I had spoken to him once over the phone. He cried, not with anger this time, but with regret. I told him I hoped he would find a way forward, but I also told him I would no longer be his safety net. Boundaries were my new language. As the evening unfolded, I took the stage. My heels clicked against the wood, the sound echoing through the room, but I no longer felt nervous. I looked out at the faces, students, parents, donors, strangers, and I felt only clarity. "When I was younger," I began, "I was told that the path I chose was unworthy. I was invisible in my own family, erased in every story, forgotten in every toast. I gave everything I had, and still I was seen as nothing. But I stand before you tonight to tell you this. Being seen is not a gift someone else can grant you. It is a right you claim for yourself." The audience listened, still as stone. Some nodded, others dabbed their eyes. "I created this foundation," I continued, "so that no student would ever feel the way I once did, that their passion was lesser, their work invisible, their dreams unworthy. Finance, business, numbers, they are not just practical, they are powerful. They build futures, they shape lives, they hold the keys to change." Applause began softly, then grew. I raised my hand slightly, not to stop it, but to guide it into silence again. "If you take anything from my story, let it be this. Boundaries are not walls, they are bridges. They connect you to people who will respect you, who will value you, and they protect you from those who never could. I let the words settle before closing. I was invisible once. I am not invisible anymore. And neither are you. The room erupted. People rose to their feet, clapping until the chandeliers trembled. My mother cried openly, holding my father's hand. Students smiled through tears. For the first time in my life, the applause was for me. Not because I demanded it, but because I had earned it by standing tall in my own story. When I stepped down, I felt lighter than I ever had before. The shadow of Daniel, of being the overlooked child, of every ignored sacrifice, no longer loomed over me. I had stepped fully into my own light. Later that evening, as the guests began to leave, a young woman approached me. She was no older than 19, clutching a scholarship certificate with trembling fingers. "Miss Carter," she said, her voice shaking. "Thank you. People told me I was wasting my time studying accounting, but tonight I feel like I matter." Her words pierced me, but in the best way. I reached out, squeezing her hand. "You do matter. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. You see yourself. That is enough." She smiled, tears streaming down her cheeks, and walked away, leaving me standing there with my own eyes wet. As the ballroom emptied, I looked around the room one last time. This time, I wasn't near the service entrance. I wasn't a background figure in someone else's story. I was at the center, not because of money or power, but because I had claimed my place. I walked toward the doors, the sound of applause still echoing in my memory. The city waited outside, alive and endless, and for the first time, I stepped into it not as someone overlooked, but as someone fully seen. If you have ever had to fight for your worth, if you have ever demanded respect from those who should have given it freely, I want to hear your story. Share it, because your voice might be the courage someone else needs. And if this journey resonated with you, stay connected. There are more stories to tell, more truths to uncover, and more lights waiting to shine where shadows once lived.